You're watching your local news leader. This is WCIA 3 News at 6.
They know it's wrong. Stand up and say it, because until we as a community draw that line, then it doesn't exist.
A plea from the Decatur police chief for shooting witnesses to come forward with information. He says it's the #1 barrier to solving cases, as teenagers are getting shot and killed at a growing rate. Good evening, I'm Jessica Coons. Jennifer is off tonight. This is not a crisis unique to the city, but it was exacerbated this weekend with the loss of a 14-year-old girl and another 3 teenagers sent to the hospital. Investigative reporter Renee Cooper joins us now. She sat down with the chief today to address growing concerns. Renee?
Good evening, Jessica. The chief, Shane Brandel, says teenagers and kids as young as 12 are ending up both in front of and behind the trigger, creating a growing segment of a generation more and more desensitized to gun violence. In the wake of the weekend's disheartening news, we sat down for a dialogue about why more than a quarter of gun violence victims this year have been 17 and younger. Chief Brandel is asking for action and some common decency.
You have a 14-year-old that was murdered, and it's sad when you can have 100 people know exactly what happened, but nobody has the decency, and I use that word intentionally, decency, to come forward and say, this is a line that nobody should cross, and you did, and you should be held accountable to it. And it's sickening.
Based on data compiled from police department press releases, most shootings this year have gone unsolved. Am I reading that correctly?
You know, without having the data in front of me, I can't say, but I would say that it's not unusual in certain cases where there's a non-fatal shooting that it does go unsolved. And we may actually know who did it, but an anonymous caller telling us who's involved in it isn't evidence to support an arrest.
Where arrests have been made, a trend is clear. A high percentage of people pulling the trigger are teenagers.
We've arrested a 14-year-old for shooting, for like 3 of them. That used to be unheard of.
Chief Shane Brandel blames the ease of access to weapons, in part, for why guns are more often landing in the hands of kids.
These aren't like, you know, the old gangs of the gangster disciples or the vice lords. You don't have that really anymore. You have little groups that will call themselves some name, and they're you know, might be 10 or 15, you know, teenagers that are involved in this group, and there's no real leadership to that.
He says the allegiance is primarily divided among neighborhoods, but since there isn't an organized crime group to address, officers' focus shifts to individuals.
It's not uncommon at all that we arrest juveniles for offenses like armed robbery or aggravated discharge or possession of weapons. Maybe they get detained, for a day, and then they're right back out on the street. All that does is reaffirm the no consequence principle, and they're right back at what they were doing.
What is Decatur specifically doing to proactively reach this group of kids?
So the city of Decatur is reaching out to all of our citizens. Decatur has all of the ingredients in place for a successful recipe to reduce gun violence. We just need to put all of those ingredients together.
Overall, shootings are down slightly year over year, but murders have already surpassed last year's total. Brandel worries one of his own could be next.
I fear what's going to happen one of these days. We've had it. We had a foot chase here not too long ago, or turned around and fired at the officer.
That was one of 4 officer-involved shootings in the last year, as police are increasingly outgunned.
We're talking a 50-round drum on a handgun that's been converted to full auto. There's a problem with that.
Now, the chief says progress is on the horizon. A team of 10 officers recovered 35 guns this summer, but not without several highly dangerous foot chases. He says the safety of his officers relies on serious consequences for those who shouldn't have had a gun in the first place. He also applauded Macon County judges for routinely setting higher bond for gun offenses. Jessica, back to you.
All right, Renee, thank you.